The year is 878 AD. Somewhere in the rolling green countryside of Wiltshire, England, along the gentle bend of the Axe Stream, the fires of a conquering army burn low in the cold morning mist. The smoke rises slowly, curling upward into a pale and indifferent sky, drifting over a camp that stretches across the open fields of Edington like a scar carved into the earth itself. This is no refugee camp. This is no desperate gathering of hungry men clinging to survival. This is a resting place of conquerors. Men who have already remade the map of England with fire and iron and the sheer, unstoppable weight of their ambition. These are the Vikings, and they are, without question, at the absolute peak of their power. For years, their longships have carved up the coastlines of Britain like knives through soft flesh, driving inland along every river, every valley, every road that could carry a determined man with a weapon and a hunger for gold. Kingdom after kingdom has bent before them. Proud cities have burned. Churches have been stripped to their foundations. Kings have fled, surrendered, or died with Viking spears in their chests. The Saxons, once proud defenders of their ancient land, have paid tribute in gold torn from altars and silver wrung from trembling hands. And still the Vikings came, always moving, always hungry, always absolutely certain of tomorrow. At the center of all this power stands Guthrum the Old. He is not simply a raider. He is a commander of fleets, a seasoned warlord, a man who has broken fortified towns before breakfast and watched great Saxon armies crumble at the sight of his banners. He is experienced in a way that only a man who has survived 100 desperate battles can be experienced. Confident in a way that only a man who has never truly been tested by an equal can be confident. He is camped here at Edington because he has already won, or so he believes. He does not yet know that a king is coming from the marshes, and that everything is about to change forever. To understand what is at stake on this cold morning in Edington, one must travel back in time, back to the year 865 AD, when the nature of the Viking threat changed forever. For decades before that year, Norse and Danish raiders had harassed the coast of England in waves. They came, they plundered, they disappeared back into the sea. Terrifying, yes. Destructive, certainly, but ultimately temporary. A storm that passed and left survivors to rebuild. Then came the Great Heathen Army. And nothing was ever the same again. This was not a raiding party. This was not a seasonal war band looking for gold and glory before sailing home. This was a massive, organized, and utterly intentional force of conquest, led by warriors who would become legends. Among them were the sons of Ragnar Lothbrok, names that carried the weight of myth and terror in equal measure. These men had not crossed the North Sea to raid. They had come to stay. They had come to rule. One by one, the great kingdoms of England fell before them. Northumbria, once a shining center of Christian learning and cultural power, was conquered and broken apart. Its cities burned. Its monasteries were silenced. East Anglia suffered an even darker fate. Its king, Edmund, refused to surrender his faith or his dignity. The Vikings executed him in a manner so brutal that the faithful would later call him a martyr and a saint. His kingdom was absorbed completely, swallowed whole into the growing Viking territory. Then came Mercia, vast and ancient, the heartland of England. It was split between Saxon and Dane, divided against itself until it could no longer stand as a unified power. A kingdom reduced to a shadow of what it had once been. By the time Guthrum had risen to prominence among the Viking leaders, almost all of England either knelt directly before Danish rule or paid heavy tribute to survive. Almost all of it. Almost. One kingdom remained. One Saxon stronghold still stood. Wessex. And it had Alfred. Alfred had not inherited an easy throne. His older brothers had fought the Vikings before him and died, or been humiliated in the attempt. His father had purchased temporary peace with gold that only made the enemy bolder and more ambitious. By the time Alfred took the crown of Wessex, the kingdom was already bleeding from a dozen wounds, and the men who wanted to finish it off were sharpening their axes just beyond the horizon. Alfred was not a man who surrendered easily. He was a king who learned from failure, who studied his enemies, who adapted his strategies with remarkable patience and intelligence. His greatest achievement in those early years was a system, a network of fortified towns built across Wessex, each one positioned to shelter the local population and serve as a base for organized defense. It was a brilliant idea, a forward-thinking solution to the Viking problem. For a time, it worked. Then the winter of 877 arrived, and Guthrum came with it. The Danish commander drove into Wessex with overwhelming numbers and a relentless, crushing purpose that the system had never been designed to withstand at such scale. Town after town fell silent. Some were stormed and burned. Others were simply starved into submission, their defenders watching helplessly as supplies ran out and relief never came. The Saxon army, badly outnumbered and slowly losing faith, began to break apart at its edges. Alfred's position became impossible. There was no fortress left that could hold. There was no army large enough to fight. There was nothing left to do but disappear. He retreated to the fens and marshes near Athelney in the heart of Somerset, a place where water and reed beds and thick fog made pursuit almost impossible. His family was scattered or hidden. His kingdom flew Viking banners. His throne belonged to someone else. For months, the King of Wessex lived like a hunted animal in the cold darkness of the marsh. This was not strategy. This was survival. This was the very edge of extinction. A lesser man would have given up. A lesser king would have looked at the cold water surrounding him, at the fog pressing in from every direction, at the kingdom that had been taken from him piece by piece, and he would have accepted defeat. He would have slipped away into exile, perhaps to the court of a friendly Frankish king, perhaps to Rome, perhaps simply into obscurity and forgotten history. Many men in Alfred's position had done exactly that. Alfred did not. Instead, in the darkness and silence of the Athelney marshes, he began to think. He thought about Guthrum. He studied everything he knew about how the Viking commander operated, how he made decisions, how victory had shaped his assumptions. A man who had never truly been beaten, Alfred understood, was a man who had stopped imagining the possibility of defeat. Guthrum would rest his army once conquest seemed assured. He would let his guard down. He would not maintain perfect readiness through the long, quiet weeks of spring. That moment of relaxed certainty would be the crack in the armor. Alfred moved carefully and quietly through his network of loyal men, messengers who had never stopped serving their king, even when serving him meant nothing but personal danger. Through whispers and trusted hands, word spread across the Saxon lands. The king was alive. The king was planning. The king was calling them home. The FYRD answered. From the northeast, Ealdormen who had kept small forces alive in hills and deep forests began to march, loyal commanders bringing whatever warriors they could gather, some hundreds, some thousands, every one of them responding to a summons they had almost stopped believing would ever come. From the south and west came the local militias, free men and landholders carrying spears and axes, and whatever armor they possessed, men who had fought Vikings before, and had scores to settle that went far beyond duty or obligation. And from the marshes came Alfred himself, with his household warriors, lean and hardened by months of exile, and burning with a singular, cold, unstoppable purpose. Alfred did not march blindly. He had spent months in the marshes thinking, planning, and preparing for exactly this moment, and he was not about to waste it on a hasty decision made without proper intelligence. Before a single Saxon soldier took a step toward Edington, Alfred had already sent his scouts ahead. Men who knew the Wiltshire landscape as intimately as they knew their own faces. Men who could move through countryside unseen, observe, count, and return with information that a king could actually use. What they brought back was precisely what Alfred needed to hear. Guthrum's army was camped along the Axe Stream at Edington, positioned on higher ground with open fields spreading out around the camp in every direction. It was a confident position, the kind of position a commander chooses when he believes he has already won and simply needs somewhere comfortable to rest his victorious army. The palisade was solid but not impenetrable. The guard were present but not alert. The Viking camp had the unmistakable atmosphere of an army that was not expecting a serious fight. Alfred chose Edington deliberately. The open terrain meant no hidden surprises for either side. The higher ground gave the Vikings a defensive advantage, yes, but it also meant they could not easily maneuver or escape if the battle turned against them. Most importantly, the Saxons would be the attackers, the ones of momentum, the ones arriving with fury and purpose against an enemy still rubbing sleep from its eyes. As the Saxon army moved through the roads and fields of Wiltshire, Alfred did something that no general's manual could have prescribed. He walked among his men. He moved through the ranks constantly, speaking to commanders, speaking to common soldiers, letting them see him with their own eyes. For months, many of these men had believed their king was dead or lost beyond recovery. Now he was here, lean and sharp-eyed and absolutely alive, and something fundamental hardened in them. In the Viking camp, Guthrum received reports of the Saxon advance and dismissed them entirely. He had beaten Saxons before. He would beat them again. The Saxon advance. The battle began not with a war cry, but with a single Saxon horn cutting to the cold morning fog. The sun was barely risen over the Wiltshire fields when the sound reached the Viking camp. Warriors scrambled from their sleep, grabbing weapons, shouting commands, forming hasty lines. Across the mist-covered ground, the Saxon army was already moving, thousands of men advancing in disciplined formation, shields locked together. Spears pointed forward like a forest of iron, slow and deliberate and completely unstoppable in their silent, terrible purpose. First contact. The armies came together with collision that survivors would describe for the rest of their lives. The sound was not glorious. It was with splitting leather cracking, men screaming in effort and agony simultaneously. But while the main Saxon force ground against the Viking shield wall from the front, Alfred's light horsemen struck the Viking right flank without warning. The line bent inward sharply. Guthrum saw it immediately and understood with cold, sinking clarity that he had not simply been attacked. He had been outmaneuvered, Viking fighting withdrawal. Guthrum responded with the brutal professionalism of an experienced commander. He ordered a fighting retreat toward his palisade camp, pulling his men backward in formation while maintaining enough discipline to cover the withdrawal. The battle became grinding and claustrophobic in the thickening fog. When the Saxons reached the palisade, the fighting turned desperate and savage, the most dangerous phase for both sides. Alfred at the front. Alfred moved to the very edge of the assault himself. His golden dragon banner of Wessex appeared through the fog and smoke, and his men saw their king fighting alongside them. Fury replaced fatigue instantly. The tide turns. Fresh Saxon reinforcements arrived from the south and west. The fog lifted. Guthrum finally saw the full scale of what had come for him. The numbers had shifted against him completely. The collapse. Through midday and into the long afternoon, accumulated Saxon pressure broke the Viking line piece by piece. As shadows grew long across the field, Guthrum turned his horse and rode away. The battle was lost. When the last Viking warrior disappeared into the northern woods and the sound of battle finally faded from the Wiltshire fields, what remained was silence. A silence so deep and so sudden that it felt almost physical, pressing down on the ears of exhausted men who had spent hours surrounded by nothing but noise, violence, and the desperate, roaring chaos of survival. The silence of battlefield after the killing stops is unlike any other silence in the world. It is heavy with everything that has just happened and everything that will never happen now. The field at Edington was a landscape of absolute devastation. Bodies lay scattered across the open ground in every direction, Saxon and Viking alike, tangled in the tall grass and half submerged in the reeds along the Axe stream. The great palisade that Guthrum had constructed with such confidence that morning was torn completely apart. Carts lay overturned and shattered. Supplies were scattered and ransacked across a wide area. The black raven banners of the Viking army, symbols that had flown over half of conquered England, lay trampled deep into the mud beneath the feet of men who would never bow to them again. The Saxon soldiers stood among all of this with hollow eyes and blood-crusted armor, their bodies running entirely on the last burning traces of adrenaline before exhaustion claimed them completely. They were broken in the way that only men who have given absolutely everything can be broken. And they were triumphant in the way that only men who have saved something irreplaceable can be triumphant. Both things were true simultaneously, and neither canceled the other out. Alfred gave no order for a relentless pursuit. That was never the point. The point was not to destroy every Viking warrior on English soil. That would have been impossible. The point was to break the occupation of Wessex, to end the certainty of Viking dominance, to prove that England was not yet lost. That had been accomplished. As twilight deepened slowly into darkness, Alfred walked the field alone, passing the dead on both sides, and understood that something enormous had just changed forever.